Welcome back to the channel where we're doing the lessons in chess.com. We're still in the beginner section, and today we're doing winning the game. So let's get right into it. Start there.
The four-move checkmate is a common way to win at the beginner level. 1. e4, e5. 2. Queen h5 knight, c6, bishop c4, with queen takes f7 checkmate. Black can stop it by blocking the white queen from reaching f7.
Okay, let's go with the next thing here. All right, gotta hit that play button.
Some people with a little experience in chess may have heard of the famous four-move checkmate. For a beginner, this can sound both exciting and scary. Who wouldn't want to win in 4 moves? And of course, nobody wants to lose in 4 moves.
No.
Luckily, the four-move checkmate is only dangerous in name. If you know what you're doing, that is. The four-move checkmate is a fast attack that develops some pieces very quickly toward the center and the enemy king. White typically opens the game with e4, controlling the center and opening lines for the light square bishop and queen. Black responds with e5, controlling the center and opening up lines. And after bishop to c4, white quickly brings the bishop to an active diagonal, controlling the center and pointing at the weak f7 square.
Okay, so the first move, the e4, e5, that's pretty normal, pretty standard. Not everybody brings out their bishop first. A lot of times they bring up a knight first.
Notice the f7 square is only protected by Black's king. Black typically plays knight to c6, making a sensible developing move, or sometimes will play bishop to c5. In either case, White has the option of the aggressive queen to h5, joining the bishop in the attack against the key f7 square. If Black isn't careful, White will deliver checkmate on the very next move. Knight f6 is a very common mistake. Black moves the knight toward the center and threatens to win the queen. What could possibly be wrong with this move? Unfortunately, it forces the white queen to move exactly where it wanted to go, the f7 square, and deliver checkmate. You'll notice that the black king has nowhere to run. Black also can't block the check as the queen is literally touching the king. Notice Black has no piece to capture the queen, and the king cannot capture the queen, because then the light square bishop would capture the king, and that's not allowed. This is the four-move checkmate. Now let's go back and see how Black could have avoided this unfortunate end to the game. After the moves e4, e5, bishop c4, knight c6, and queen h5, Black must block the f7 square. The best way to do this is by playing g6. It attacks the queen, and it prevents the queen from capturing f7. White retreats the queen, but don't celebrate too early.
It would also prevent it from taking this piece and getting a free one.
The white queen refocuses its attack on the f7 square, threatening checkmate on the very next turn. Black can once again block the queen's path to the f7 square and develop a piece at the same time with knight f6. Notice if white tried to capture the knight, Black would recapture and win the queen. At this point, Black is safe and white has wasted some time running around with the queen. Finally, we have one more aggressive idea to be prepared for when our opponent tries to win the game with the four-move checkmate. After e4, e5, White does not have to play bishop to c4 on the next turn. White could play the more aggressive queen h5. White threatens the weakened f7 square and threatens to win the e5 pawn with check. Remember, it's very important to defend the e5 pawn first and only then block the queen's attack on the f7 square. The best move for Black is knight c6, developing a piece toward the center and protecting the e5 pawn. After bishop to c4, White's bishop joins the attack on the f7 square. Do you remember how Black can best block the f7 square and attack the queen? That's right, g6. White sets up another checkmate with queen f3, threatening to take on f7. Do you remember how to block the second checkmate attack?
With another knight.
That's right, knight to f6. Now,
so like, going back here for a second. If you moved up this pawn right here, oh, you see me, the pawn up here to that, or there, then he is not as defended as if you moved and developed the knight.
Second checkmate attack? That's right, knight to f6. Now that you've learned what the 4-move checkmate is, it's time to see what you've learned.
Basically, time to show that I was paying attention.
Can you develop a knight toward the center and protect the pawn?
Man. Could. But I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to develop the knight.
Excellent job. Black develops a knight to an excellent square and protects the pawn. How can black attack the white queen and block the queen from capturing the f7 pawn? Fantastic. Black attacks the queen with the pawn and blocks the queen from capturing f7.
Move it there.
How can you develop a piece and block the queen from delivering checkmate on f7?
Well, we're supposed to use the knight, but let's again, we're supposed to use the knight to here, but let's try what it says here.
Nice try. But this move either allows checkmate or loses material for black.
Then again,
Let's try to develop a piece toward the center of the board and block white's queen from capturing the f7 pawn.
because if I did a pawn exchange here, the queen would still come up there, and I'd either still have to block with the knight or the f7 square is in trouble. So the actual answer is
Great job. Black develops a knight toward the center and blocks the white queen from delivering checkmate on f7.
boom.
Can you develop a knight toward the center and protect the e5 pawn? Great job. You moved the knight toward the center and added protection to the e5 pawn. White brings the queen to h5, planning on delivering checkmate on f7. How can you attack the queen and defend against checkmate? Excellent. Black attacks the queen and blocks
Move
checkmate.
back to here.
Can you develop a knight toward the center and threaten to capture white's pawn on e4? Great job. The knight develops toward the center and threatens the unprotected pawn on e4. White carelessly brings out the queen, dreaming of a checkmate on f7.
Yeah.
Can you find black's best defense? You got it. Black wins white's queen.
If they were doing that, they were not paying attention in the game. They are very much a rookie. Right?
Because the king can't move into check, it is often possible to checkmate by placing a queen next to the opponent's king and having the queen defended by another one of your pieces.
Basically, this queen comes to here, checkmate.
In the 4-move checkmate lesson, we learned a new concept where black was checkmated by the white queen, and black couldn't capture the queen with the king because the queen was protected by the bishop on c4, like this. A king can never put itself in check, even when capturing. So many times when you checkmate, it's done by one piece who is checking and one piece that is protecting and assisting the other piece. Let's see some examples of assisted checkmates. In this position, white can deliver checkmate by using the queen to put the king in check with the assistance of the pawn protecting the queen.
Boom.
Can you see the mate in one?
Yep.
If you found queen g7 checkmate, great job. The queen attacks the king, and the king cannot escape the check because the queen covers all of the king's escape squares and the pawn protects the queen, meaning the black king cannot capture the queen. It's checkmate. Game over. Let's look at
Hell hath no fury like a woman's wrath.
another example. In this position, black's king does not have any legal squares. Notice that both the white knight and queen join together on the g8 square, right next to the king. White can deliver a check with the queen that is assisted by the knight on e7 with queen g8, checkmate. Now that you've learned how pieces assist each other in delivering checkmate, it's your turn to practice assisted checkmates.
All right. Double dragon.
Can you combine the forces of the queen and bishop to deliver checkmate? Great job. The queen checks the king and covers its escape squares while the bishop protects the queen.
No question there.
Can you combine the powers of the rook and knight to deliver checkmate? Great job. The rook checks the king and the knight protects the rook and the black king's escape square on b8. Black is threatening queen takes g2 checkmate on the next move, but it is white to play. Can you checkmate black's king before it's too late? Excellent. The queen delivers checkmate. Black's queen is ready to end the game with queen g2 checkmate. Can you find a clever move that checkmates Black's king? Fantastic! White promotes into a queen and checkmates the black king just in time. Both kings are in danger, but it is white to move. Can you find the winning move? Great job! Black's king is checkmated in the corner.
It's funny. A lot of times the king will assist in the checkmate as well. Again, doing the old protection bit. Especially toward the end game, where like when you get a pawn and the king by itself versus just the king.
When you have two rooks or a rook and queen, the pieces can take turns controlling rows on the board until the opposing king runs out of squares. Watch the video for more details.
I call this the ludicrous theory because, you know, every time I do it, I go, get back, you don't know me like that. Sorry, I'm from the early 2000s. That was a big song back then. Anyway, let's go.
It's very rare to checkmate with just one piece. It usually requires several pieces to surround and finally checkmate the king. One of the most important examples of this is checkmating with two rooks, sometimes called the rook roller. Let's see how this works. In this position, notice the rook on c2 controls the entire c-file. This means that the black king cannot enter the c-file as long as the rook is on that file. Rook d1 checks the king on the d-file, and since the king can't enter the c-file, Black's king is forced to move closer to the edge of the board. Now that the d-file is covered by the rook on d1, let's use the other rook to check the king on the e-file. Rook e2 check. Notice that the rooks take turns checking the king, cutting the black king off one file at a time.
Simple as that.
Let's watch the rook rollers roll the king up onto the edge of the board and deliver checkmate. After king f7, we bring the other rook to the f-file, checking the king. The king moves to the g-file. Now that the f-file is covered, we play rook to g2 check. The king is forced to the edge of the board and has run out of files. It's checkmate on the next move with rook h1, checkmate. The rook roller doesn't only work on files, it also works on ranks. Notice the rook on h4 covers the entire fourth rank. So in this case, we use the other rook to check the king on the fifth rank. And since the fourth rank and fifth rank are now covered by the rooks, the king gets rolled up the board again. King c6, rook h6 check, king to d7, rook to g7 check, and after king e8, rook h8, checkmate. Now that you've learned how to checkmate with two rooks against the king, it's your turn to practice checkmating with the rook rollers.
Let's do it.
Use the rook roller to checkmate black. Great job,
Bam.
Black is checkmated. Now we have a vertical rook roller. Find checkmate in one. Excellent. Black is checkmated. How can you force Black's king to the back rank on the next move?
Get back, you don't know me like that.
The rook roller in action. Black's king is forced to the back rank. Can you find the move that ends the game immediately? Great job, Black is checkmated. Black's queenside pieces look scary, but White can checkmate with the rooks. How should you do it?
Because the knight is blocking, go with that one first.
Good start. How can you checkmate? Well done.
I don't really know how scary that was, but yeah.
White king is under attack by the black queen and rook, but White's rooks can force Black's king into the corner. Can you find the move? Fantastic. Black's king is forced into the corner. Can you find the winning move for White?
If you did that one
You did it. Black's king is checkmated just in time.
there.
You can force checkmate with a king and queen against a king. Your queen can force the king to the edge, and then your king can help for an assisted checkmate. Watch the video for details.
Even the powerful queen cannot checkmate the king all by itself.
No.
Many times you will find yourself with just your king and queen against the other king, and you need to know how to finish the job. It can be pretty frustrating unless you know what you're doing. Let's see how it works. In this position, we can use an assisted checkmate idea to win the game in just one move. Notice that the white king and queen both meet on the G7 square, right next to the black king. The queen can move to that square, checking the black king, and since the white queen is protected by its own king, the game is checkmate. Delivering a check.
Now that's hard to watch sometimes because it reminds me of how dual incomes always beat the single income.
Checkmate in the corner of the board is nice, but how do we force the king to the corner and set up checkmate? Let's take a look. In this position, black's king is on the central square D5. In order to checkmate the king, it must be forced to the edge of the board.
Yep.
Notice that the black king can move to any of the other central squares on the next turn, D4, E4, or E5. White's first goal is to prevent the king from staying in the center of the board and pushing it toward the corners. Queen to E3 prevents the king from staying in the center, so the king must move toward the corners. After king D6, White's next job is to prevent the black king from returning to the center. Queen to E4. Notice the queen is keeping the king out of the center, and it's slowly pushing the black king toward the corner. You'll also see that White's queen is always one knight move distance away from the black king. We'll see the white queen continue to shadow the king a knight's distance away for the rest of the game. Black plays king C5, still trying to stay near the center, and white plays queen D3. After king C6, queen D4. Notice black moves up a square, white's queen moves up a square. The black king moves down a diagonal square, the queen moves down a diagonal square. The king moves up, the queen moves up. Notice always a knight's distance away. After king A7, the king goes up a diagonal square, the white queen goes up a diagonal square as well. Now comes the most important part of this position. After king A8, should the white queen continue to shadow the king a knight's distance away? If queen B6 is played, the black king does not have a legal square, but it is also not check. Do you remember what we call that when that happens? That's right, stalemate. It's a draw. So be sure to avoid that move. In this position, once you get the king into the corner, allow it to continue to dance on these two squares, back and forth, until your white king is able to set up an assisted checkmate. Let's see how that works. After king C2, king A7, king C3, king A8, king C4, king A7, king C5, king A8, king C6, king A7. Now that white's king is close to the queen, can you find an assisted checkmate in this position?
Yep.
That's right. Queen to B7, checkmate. The white king assists the queen in delivering the checkmate to the king. Now that you've learned how to check.
Now, I will say this about that. When I think about it real quick, I've played this so many times in my games, but I never heard it phrased like that, keeping the queen at a nice distance. So even going through some of these beginner lessons, I'm learning some stuff. So I hope you are too. Back to it.
White to move, can you find an immediate checkmate? Great job. The queen. Can white deliver checkmate immediately? Or should white play king G6 to prepare checkmate?
Because if you do G6, he just moves down to H7.
Excellent job. Black
Or
is
stalemate.
checkmated.
I apologize. It would be a stalemate because the queen is already on 7.
Black's king is cornered. Can you find a move for white that sets up checkmate on the following turn?
So again, remember the L, right? So if I keep the L there, it wouldn't be a check, but it'd be a stalemate. So that's not going to work.
Great job. The white king prepares to help the queen deliver checkmate on the next turn. Can you? Excellent. Black is checkmated. How can white checkmate in one move? Well done. How can white make an immediate checkmate? Nice work.
I was gonna say, I wasn't sure if I needed five activities, but that last one, yeah, man, sometimes threw me for a second.
A king and rook can checkmate a lone king. The simplest mating strategy is known as the box method. Watch the video for details.
Let's go. Very similar to the queen.
As you've already learned, checkmate with 2 rooks is pretty easy, and checkmating with just 1 queen is simple too, once you know how to do it. Another common checkmate comes from king plus rook versus king. In this position, you don't have the power of the queen, and instead have to use some patience to get the job done. Let's see how to do it. The first thing the rook needs to do is put the king into a box. After rook h4, notice the black king is within this box, and white's goal is to never allow the black king to escape from this box. Black's king gets closer to the rook, and white's rook, unlike the queen, will need help from the king to push the black king into the corner and deliver checkmate. The reason
Because I was gonna tell it because you can move to this diagonal and potentially take the rook if you're not careful and paying attention.
why is the rook cannot move diagonally, so the lone king can sneak up and attack the rook from a diagonal. This means white needs to bring the king closer to the rook and protect it, like this. After king g5, black threatens to win white's rook, and white's king arrives just in time to protect the rook. White begins the slow but effective plan of pushing black's king back into a corner in order to deliver checkmate.
Now, also, if your king wasn't right there, you would just move the rook over to the other side of the board.
After every move, the side with the rook has to ask, can my rook safely shrink the box? If the answer is yes, then move the rook. If the answer is no, then move the king closer to the opponent's king. In this position, can white's rook safely shrink the box?
Yes.
Yes, it can, with rook g4. How about now? Can white shrink the box again?
Yes.
If you said rook f4, you're correct. White shrinks the box once again. After king d5, can white shrink the box?
No.
Well, not safely, because after rook e4, the king would just take the rook. Also notice if the rook moves to f5, the king is able to run outside of the box. So remember, when you can't shrink the box, move your king closer to the opponent's king, like this. After king e5, can white shrink the box now? Notice
Good.
if rook e4 check, the black king is able to move outside of the box. Remember, in a rook and king versus king position, only check the king with the rook when it is checkmate. Otherwise, bring your king closer to the opponent's king.
But yes, I understand the theory is if you did move the rook over, it would put him in a smaller box. But that's not the point of the lesson.
White brings the king closer to the other king, and after king d5, can white shrink the box? You bet. Rook e4. So slowly but surely, white is making progress. After king d6, white cannot shrink the box safely, so white brings the king closer to the opponent's king. After king c6, can white shrink the box?
Yes.
Absolutely. Rook e5. After king d6, black decides to give white some trouble. In this position, I can't shrink the box as white, because if we play rook to d5 check, the king escapes. But also, how do I move the king closer to the opponent's king? I can't. So what do we do here? In this position, we just need to move our king somewhere to protect our rook. And in fact, there's only one square to do it. King e4.
Yep.
After king c6, can white shrink the box now? Absolutely. Rook to d5. And notice, white's making some real progress now. After king c7, white brings the king closer to the opponent's king. And after king c6, white continues to bring the king closer. After king c7, can white shrink the box now? Absolutely. Rook to d6. And after king to b7, white plays king to d7, getting closer to the opponent's king. After king b8, can white shrink the box? Yes, after rook c6. White's getting really close to pushing that king into the corner.
Mm-hmm.
After king b7, here we are again. White cannot shrink the box, but we also can't move the king closer to the opponent's king.
Nope.
What to do? When this happens, it's simple. Just protect your rook and make black move. Black moves to b8, and can you shrink the box now with the rook?
Yep.
Absolutely. Rook to c7. And after king to a8, White brings the king closer to the opponent's king. King b8. White moves the king closer again. And now, after king a8, the king is finally in the corner, and White is ready to deliver a checkmate. Can you see which rook move will deliver checkmate? If you found rook to c8, checkmate, great job. White delivers a checkmate. After learning how to checkmate with the queen and king, and now the rook and king versus king, you may expect the next videos to include checkmate with a king and one other piece. It turns out only the queen and rook can partner with the king by themselves to checkmate a lone king. All other pieces need more support to deliver a checkmate. Now that you've learned how to checkmate a king with a rook and king, it's your turn to practice the king and rook checkmate.
So real quick on that one, I just want to point out why it is true you can't do it with a bishop and a king or a knight and a king. You can do it with the pawn and a king, but the catch is that ultimately the pawn promotes to a queen. And since the pawn is not considered a piece, he's technically correct. Just FYI. Go to the activities.
Black's king is trapped on the back rank. Can you find the winning move for white? Great job, black is checkmated. Black's king is stuck on the A file. Can you find the move that wins immediately for white? Excellent. Black is checkmated. How can you bring your king closer to the black king so you can checkmate in just 2 moves? Fantastic. White's king protects all of the black king's escape squares on the 7th rank. Can you find checkmate for white? Great job, black is checkmated. White wants to force black's king to move to a8 and deliver checkmate on the next turn. How can you do it? Excellent. Black's king is forced to a8. Finish the game with checkmate.
If you did it that one, he could escape to that square.
Good work, black is checkmated.
So that's why you have to go to the back one.
How should white line up the kings to force checkmate in just 2 moves? Good start. Where's the checkmate? Well done.
So it's that simple, guys. All right. Well, that was the end of this lesson. I hope that was informative to you. I hope it was entertaining. Let me know in the comments below what you think. And as always, I appreciate you watching and learning chess with me. So until next time, this is Chris saying you have a good night or day.